pulling back and people say, oh, I just keep procrastinating this. Very often, there's something there that you're very unclear about. Why you're doing it, why it's important. Is this even something you should be doing? How should I do it? All these things are areas that if you don't have clarity in, you're going to hesitate to take that first step or that next step.
Dory 1, this is Fire Team Delta. Dad's coming home. Welcome to the Military Veteran Dad Podcast, where it is our mission to bring every dad home. I am your host, Ben Killoy. I'm a United States Marine veteran, husband, and a father. We will bring authentic conversations to inspire action in your life so we can close the gap between the dad you are today and the dad you want to be tomorrow. This is the Military Veteran Dad Podcast. Welcome back to Military Veteran Dad, episode 65. It is a crazy time out there with everything coronavirus going on, but I want to offer you that hopefully this podcast is a safe place where you can have those thoughts, have those fears, because as a human being, I have those fears and they're going through my head. How do you protect your family? All these different things. This has never been a better time to find a friend, to find a community, to find someone to share the load, to share the questions, to share the anxiety, because there is a lot of life going on out there. It's one of the reasons why we have a Facebook group where we can come together, share what's going on our heart, and just do life together. So if you haven't joined our Facebook group, now has never been a better time to make sure you have a community of like-minded men in your life that can help move your life forward. Before we get started, I want to honor two Marines that lost their lives last week in Afghanistan or in Iraq that the Pentagon announced. Gunnery Sergeant Diego Pongo, he left behind a daughter and his wife, and then also Captain Moise Navas, who left behind a girl, 3 boys, and also his wife. Guys, these kids no longer get to feel their father's love, and their father no longer gets to feel their kids' love. So despite what we have going on in the world right now and all the chaos, there is still a layer of sadness in two families that they're just now beginning to feel what that will be like to do life without that anchor point, without their father in their life. So if you're listening to this and you still have a chance to hug your kids, give them 2 hugs extra for these 2 dads, and to hug them just strong enough to understand that we have a gift as fathers and we need to come home and be present. Getting started with this week's episode with Armando Cruz, we have a very rich conversation. And what I love about this conversation is that we go in through a bunch of different things. We go in from your legacy, your family legacy code, and understanding how certain things within your past can help provide guidance on where you go in your future. How to recognize what we have control over in our life, find what the next right step in your life is. That moment you feel stuck and trapped by the life you've created. And are you standing in the dark? We have this great conversation about how are you standing in the dark or standing in the light? And that can provide perspective of a lot of times what the feelings you are having around you. So this is just a great episode. And so let's get started with Armando Cruz. Welcome to the show, Armando.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, as I am for every podcast episode. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your family and what do you do right now?
Sure. Let's see. I am a father of 3 kids. I have boy, girl, boy. And I've been married to my amazing wife for 13 years. My wife and I run a fitness and physical therapy studio in Miami. And we also have a virtual coaching component to that we help people with chronic pain eliminate pain virtually as well. And that's been pretty amazing to see the transformation in people's health and pain. And then I also have a coaching business where I work specifically with married men that are entrepreneurs that want to show up more powerfully in their health, in their business, in their relationships, in their marriage. And best-selling author of The Legacy Code. It's called The Legacy Code, a modern man's guide to escape obscurity and live a life unleashed. And that story of writing that book was probably a wild adventure, which we can get into if you'd like. Other than that, I'm an adventurer at heart. I mean, I've surfed in hurricanes. scaled mountains. One of the things I like to share, I'm one of the few people that can probably say that they've made a death video, meaning I was in the side of a mountain. I literally thought I was going to die. So I made a video just in case if whoever found my body had something to take to my family.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
I'm not sure if adventure would be what a psychologist would describe you as. I think they might try to understand something. There might be a short circuit somewhere based on some of the things that you're doing.
Yeah. Some of those were before I was married. Some of these adventures have definitely been after, but the ones after have definitely scaled down. They're not as death-defying.
You're not as death-defyingly risking your kids growing up without a dad.
Exactly.
So you've got a lot going on with your life. I want to know about the Armando before this Armando existed. What was the old Armando look like? Because you weren't born this way. So I can imagine there was a journey of you becoming the person you are today. What was that journey like for you?
I would say that journey really began with the relationship with my parents, but specifically with my father. I knew early on that I wanted to be a father like my father was to me. Like I can remember being, I think it was like 12 or 13 and thinking when I grow up, I want to be a father like my dad is to me because we have so much fun. I feel so connected. And, my father growing up was my best friend, and not because I was like some weird, awkward kid that nobody wanted to speak to.
That you needed him to be your best friend.
Yeah, exactly. I had plenty of people around me. It was just, he was the one that I confided in and I trusted the most because we spent so much time together, whether it was training. He did Ironmans and ran marathons and different things like that. So, whatever sport I was playing, and I played pretty much every sport with the exception of football because I didn't have it in my school. Probably a good thing because I probably would have smashed my head pretty good. But he was always there. He was an entrepreneur. He had his own company. And I also realized that if I wanted to become a father to my kids, like he was to me, time and presence was important. And one of the things I realized is that the difference between my mom and my dad was that my mom worked for somebody and she had to fight for her 2 weeks. And it was like, before she would go on vacation, it was like, oh, you had to do everything all the work that was going to be done in that week that you were gone, you had to double it up before you left. Right? Which by the time you get to your vacation, you're exhausted. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, my dad was able to be at pretty much all my practices. And I was in a sport all year round. So it wasn't like, oh, just for this part. No, this is year round. Games, he was there. Whenever we'd have in the summers that we'd go for a week or so to go training in the mountains, he'd take a week off and he'd go train with us in the mountains. And I was like, that's the kind of life that I want. I want to be able to provide. I want to be able to be there with my family. And in that, my dad really taught me with his actions how I wanted to be as a man and as a father. It wasn't just telling me, but it was this constant, we were always in dialogue. But as I look back, I think the things that impacted me the most was not just what he said, because there's a lot of people that say stuff, mm-hmm. but the fact that I could genuinely live it. He's telling me this and I'm seeing him do it every morning. Like he would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to get in his training because he said one of his things was, look, training is important, but don't let that get in the way of your family. So you do it while everyone else is asleep, mm-hmm. right? And I would see it day in and day out.
And not just see it, but you felt it. Like it was an emotional feeling that you had growing up, and you look back and you were able to see the action, but feel how that made you feel, and then want to re-gift that to your kids. What heritage are you, Armando?
My parents are Cuban.
So did they grow up in Cuba? Like, are you first generation in United States?
I'm first generation American. They both left Cuba early because of Castro. Mm-hmm. My dad came over, I think, when he was 13, and he was a good baseball player, very good baseball player, but his family needed money. So he was working at 13 years old. He was working in factories here in Miami and then going to school. And then he would go and he would play baseball, but it wasn't the same as when he was in Cuba. And then my mom came over later, like 18, I think. Like she came in later on, but she went to Nicaragua from Cuba. And so they escaped the communists in Cuba. And then when they were in Nicaragua, my grandfather became the equivalent of Uncle Ben's. You know how Uncle Ben's rice here?
Mm-hmm.
He created his own rice that became that kind of popularity in Nicaragua. And once he had built that all up, the Sandinistas, communists, came, and he had to flee Nicaragua, and eventually ended up here. Yeah.
Do you find, or when you wrote your book, did you think that your dad was operating on some like Cruz legacy code of presence and time? Like, was that something he was almost instinctively passed down to him and then passed down to you, and now you're passing it down to your kids? Or was it like a generational change that he instinctively made to change the family tree forever kind of thing?
No, this is him. He's had like, he has siblings that are great, and my grandparents were great, but he operated kind of like to the beat of his own drum from young.
Okay, so he did make a branch on the tree all on his own.
Correct. And in all honesty, while the book itself is a lot of the structure and what I take my clients through, a lot of the men that I go through the rich man experience, a big part of it, if you read it, is stories and examples of my life growing up, and it's paying homage to my father. Like, the book is dedicated to him, and there are so many stories in there about him and I, and some of the lessons learned throughout the process that yeah, this wasn't by accident.
Did you ever go through like a rebellious phase where the old man was wrong and you were trying to create your own identity, and then only go through a few years and realize that you lost yourself in the process? Did you ever have that part, or were you always confidently Cruz and you knew what that meant?
Yes, being the firstborn. It's funny because my wife is also the firstborn, and we both kind of have a similar way. Like, we were the ones that always got it the hardest. We had to do more in the house. We had, and so there was definitely a pressure to please and make sure that we were the ones that did the right things.
Yeah.
And while I did feel that growing up, I also felt heard by my father, because it wasn't like it was my way or the highway. It was, no, we would have conversation. Okay, but have you considered this? These are the ramifications of this, and this. And so my dad is very logical, and it was the worst thing to go shopping with him. Like, my sisters and brothers and I, like, it was like we hated going. If we wanted to buy something, we were excited. We finally got money for our birthday, and we were like, oh, we want to buy something. To go with him was the worst thing, because he would say, okay, right, you want to buy this thing. It was a magazine, or it was, how many times do you think you're really going to do it? Or
a baseball card, probably.
Yeah. I mean, it could be anything. But he would kind of break it down that by the end of the whole breakdown, you're like, all right, I don't need this. All right, I'm not going to buy the thing. And so that was like, for all four of us, we hated going to the store with my dad, because especially when we were going to buy something. If they were going to buy something for us, it's different. But if we were going to buy with our money, it was always,
you would psychologically walk yourself back from the decision.
Yeah. He would never say no, which was what made it worse, because you knew what he was doing, and we couldn't argue with it, because it was like, yeah, he's laying out the facts.
You're right. I want this, but do I really need it? And
yes,
I need to work on that psychology with my daughter, who's 7, because she's always just picking junk. There was this reading challenge at the library. You had to read 20 minutes for like 30 nights in a row. And she did it like perfect. And then she goes, and there's a cart, there's books, there's a whole bunch of different books, and there's this ball that's this rubber stupid ball. And she wants the ball. And I'm like, you can get that for 15 cents anywhere. These other books are like $15. You're trading 15 cents for a ball that you won't care about in a day for a book that you enjoy reading. And she originally picked the ball, but then I talked her through, because we were there to play. And she went back downstairs and swapped it out for the book. But I was just like, It's $15. That's a lot of money. And I'm thinking, like, I don't want to buy you a $15 book. Take the free book.
I'll buy you the ball later.
Yeah, I can get a ball at a vending machine, or we got balls at home. Like, don't worry about the ball. It's a big coaching moment that most parents don't take under their wing, because it's more about just kind of like making it go away type. So they give in to whatever it is, versus like what your dad did was, I'm going to instill discipline in this decision-making process, whether they want it or not. And
right.
And now you have to carry that.
By the way, now that you say that, what was funny is, so growing up, that's how it was. When I got married, it was finally I was out. And so my rebellion came when I was married. I became the exact opposite, because my wife was like my dad in that she was the saver. So now I was open to be the spender. And so at the beginning of our marriage, I would go like on a whim. If I wanted something, I would buy it right then. I wouldn't even wait.
Your programming like a vase and just smashed it against the wall to 1,000 pieces. Like, the hell with this programming.
And then my wife like kind of reeled it back, and she's like, "Whoa, hold on, we can't continue like this." And it goes back. So I stayed the straight and narrow, and then I kind of swung all the way over there, and then now I'm back, so that now we can have these conversations.
Let's pivot to a moment in time where you found out your reason to exist on this earth, because you do have a lot of gifts that you're giving back in fitness and marriage and overall life coaching. What was the Armando like when we woke up and stepped into these ideas of what he was meant to be here for, and what his power could allow other men to do with their lives?
That's an interesting journey, and I'm gonna use the word journey, because I think this is where people miss out, because we always talk about, that moment of inspiration that but I think that's where most people struggle. It's like, how do you know? Like, when do you know? Like, I can't seem to find it. And the example that I give is the journey was growing up. I had to take out the trash, and I realized, number one, I don't want to take out trash for the rest of my life. So I knew one thing, check. I don't want to do that.
You had a strong list of what you did not want to do with your life.
Exactly. Because there were things that I was doing, whether I wanted to or not, because, my parents said, hey, this is part of the package here. If you're living here, like, you got to take out the trash. You got to mow the lawn. I quickly realized I don't want to mow lawns for a living. I said, I could do it. Like, it's a skill set that I developed, not one that I enjoyed, but I developed it. But I realized, no, I don't want to do that. And then what really kind of leveled it up is my father. I think I mentioned he had his own company, a construction company. And Miami in the summer is extremely hot, extremely humid, and the mosquitoes are ridiculous. So imagine being under that, and now hard manual labor, digging trenches, moving blocks, sweeping, carrying plywood. And I was like, no, there's no way. Like, I'm meant for more than just this. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, that's not what I want to be doing with my life. And my dad still to this day, he's like, hey, you're good at this. Not necessarily he was teaching me the ropes of the bottom rung, but I can be a foreman on a site right now. And I haven't done it in years, because I understand the vision of everything that's going on, and I can maneuver it. He was teaching me that, but the application of that, I had no desire to apply it in that setting. It's helped me be a business owner. It's helped me manage people better, but in the specifics of construction and in Miami, no way. So what ended up happening was I had a fascination with sports. I played every single sport. Like, there wasn't a season when I was in high school that I wasn't on a varsity sport. It was soccer, I played soccer. The basketball, played basketball. Baseball, I played baseball. And then when they brought out track and cross country, I switched out soccer for cross country. And then I played basketball my junior year. And then I ran track. And running is where I kind of literally found my stride. And I was like, this I like. This is something that I don't have to depend on a ball. I don't have to depend on other people, whether they have a good game or bad game. This is an honest sport. I have no one to blame if I didn't run faster. Either I move my legs quicker or not. And so there was direct feedback. Have you put in the work needed to do that? And so I started realizing that number one, I wasn't the best athlete. I was athletic enough to make a difference, but I was never the best. And so there became kind of like the obsession and the passion for, how do I get better? What are the things that other people aren't doing that I can start doing so that at least I can play at their level, if not surpass them? And I did that all throughout college because I ran track and cross country in college as well. I was never the best. And what I started realizing is I went down that road. I started in the performance. Hey, what's the training like to get faster, to get better? And then I realized, wait, there's a nutrition component. So I studied the nutrition component. And then I was like, wait, there's a strength component. Let me study the strength component. And then I realized everybody gets hurt. How do I avoid that? And how do I bounce back as quick as possible? So it started with looking inward, but then there came a point where, wait, this is a lot of knowledge that I have that I can serve other people. And that kind of became my thing, is how can I serve people so that they can do what they really love? And that's continued. That same trajectory has continued to grow from there. So I can't pinpoint it, but I can say that was the journey.
I don't know whether you've put all this together, but there was one word that I was just stringing together in my head, almost like if I was holding a string and putting little Cheerios on it and adding them all up together as like a necklace, that your dad represented a life that he controlled a lot of the variables of how he woke up every day. He designed it in a way that he probably owned like 90% of the control. And all the things you just described, control was always what you were seeking, and you kept growing within the things that were within your control, and you kept looking for inward for those things to control. And that's really where you work on that self-improvement. You let go of the things you don't control, but you quickly realized, even a foreman, you're looking for the things that you can control within that site, and you manage it best as possible. All of those things have that thread of control to them, not in a bad way, but in a way that you focus to recognize the quickest things that you can improve in your life are the things that 100% control. You control what time you wake up. You control what goes into your brain. You control the conversations you have. You control how much knowledge in different areas do you have. Do you have everyone's in Hollywood's drama and marriage memorized? Or do you have how to live a nutritious, fit life memorized?
Right.
And one helps you, or one makes you miserable and wishing you were out living in Hollywood and miserable as well with them.
No, actually, thank you for sharing that. I love being able to get that perspective. And it is a wonderful word that I would definitely say is the string that connected the Cheerios, as you said.
Because you saw it in your mom. She did not have control. And you saw the clear polar opposite with your dad, which I would almost probably describe your dad as very masculine in the way that he presented that view of the world of in control, and that he could handle what life gave him because he designed his life in a way that he controlled almost all the strings on the puppet show. And that was what attracted you to that life. And then you kept using your own curiosity to figure out how you fit into that world of, how do I create my own world of control?
Correct.
I instantly put it together when you were doing the track. I was like, that there's very few things on this earth that if you put 100% of your energy in, there's no loss of efficiency, that you almost get 100% of it back. And I would say track is one of those. Like, your body is a fueled machine that the more you understand how the machine works and all of the lubricants that it needs to get going, all of those, all that energy spent will help you on the track. The only loss of efficiency is the wind that you're running against that you really can't control and make, other than just making sure you don't run against a windy day. Like, that's it. Like, it's almost all pure energy put into it that comes out on the other side.
Right.
And it's not dependent on any person to the left or right of you. Like, how you perform doesn't matter what the guy did last night next to you. It's what you did last night.
Right. Yeah, you get instant feedback. And that's why I said it's an honest sport, because you know what? You didn't get the results that you put in the work, And yeah, so I agree 100%.
And looking at my perspective, so I grew up on a farm here in Wisconsin, and there, very few things are under your control. The only thing, you don't even really control your time, because you're almost not necessarily a slave, but the farm creates a commitment of time that you really are. It's an unnegotiable thing that you have.
Yeah, you have to
And
feed
you
animals.
have to feed the animals. You got to keep this cycle going. Your vacations aren't going to be as prominent because most of the year you're in the fields. That was my view of the world growing up. And I would probably never put this together, but I could say to myself that I didn't have a lot of control, or I always felt out of control with my emotions, my perspective, where I was going in life. I never felt like I was making the choices that was going to create my future. Probably up until even recently in the last 5 years is really when I probably started to take control. Probably the only thing I took control of, which maybe not intentionally, but joining the Marine Corps, that was one choice that I did.
Right.
And everything that I put into it, I got out of it. And everything I didn't put into it, I didn't get out of it. Some people get more, some people get less. But since then, I would say I was just following everybody else's plan, kind of like your mom, going through the process of getting a job and being a slave to their decisions. And I didn't have a chance to tell you this, but I don't think I've told you since that 3 weeks ago, I lost my job. And since then, I've felt overwhelming because you have complete control and then you have to completely decide what you want to do with your time. But at the same time, I feel a disciplined future coming into my life where control is something I'm focusing on more, and making sure probably the most important outcome of being in control of your life is consistently and consciously making the choices for where your time goes. I think that's the equal byproduct of when you have a life that you can control, then you equally control where that time flows to, which is something I'm probably sure you experience with your kids and the life you've created now.
Yes. And I think one thing that people, when we think about, one of the words that often people talk about, men a lot of time, is this word freedom. And I think there's something that people don't realize is that most people think freedom comes in choice. But the honest truth is that freedom comes through constraints. Because what constraints do help to narrow and focus your attention and your energy so that you can flourish in whatever it is that you're going to do. I can probably guess that you would describe as the Marine Corps as being very regimented, right? So constraints, but within that, there was a freedom to perform your tasks without having to be distracted by other things. You weren't in the Marine Corps worried about I don't know, about your bills, because at that point you were in the Marine Corps. Yeah.
If you're single, you're not worried about your bills. And
right.
Even if you're married,
okay.
You're really not, because they give you enough to deal with. But because it's all disposable income at that point. So you could be completely broke and still have 3 squares a day and a roof over your head.
Right. So within the constraints, it allows you to be free to create within that. And that's
or even if you're on the battlefield, it allows you to make sure that your mind's on the battlefield. Like there's a reason why the DoD spends millions of dollars on family readiness, because they know if your family's not taken care of at home, your mind's not on the battlefield where you're fighting the war.
Right. So constraints bring about freedom.
I think probably the part that hurts the word freedom the most is Braveheart, because everybody knows the line of when he's screaming freedom in that movie. And I think that's probably the most instinctive answer for freedom. And I like what you said about the constraint, because this is the illusion for freedom, time, and constraints is, and especially when I did have a job, there were certain non-negotiables, like they had 40 hours of my life. And that really wasn't something I felt like was in my control. It was something I had to do to keep the wheels moving at home and to keep money flowing in. But on the other side of that, now that it's gone, you learn that you did have choices. You just really made the no choice to actually deal with it.
Right.
That you just assume that this is the choice you have to make versus like consciously reflecting on, I do have a choice. And it may be one where it's handicapped. Maybe you do have to provide for your family, but you still have a choice that you continue that this be your life.
Right. Yeah, look, and in all fairness, though, I think it's important, and I'm bringing this up because, especially in the circles where men are present, there's this idea of manning up and the Nike slogan, just do it. That is a unskillful response or even approach. Just do it gives you no direction. Just do it doesn't give you specificity. Just do it doesn't give you a clear path to actually moving the needle forward. It's just willpower. And yes, in some instances, does it work? Yes. But when you're kind of stuck and you're in the darkness and you're struggling, when somebody says, just do it, if I could have just done it, I would have done it. I need more direction. I need more steps broken down so that I can climb out of this hole.
I like what you said there. And I've always said, like, or for me personally, when I feel stuck, that I feel like there's a fog around me. So just do it is still riddled with fear because I can't see any which way left around me of which way I'm going or where that's going to take me. So just do it. Almost like the fear mechanism, the fear of flight kicks in, where we just pull back because we need to feel safe, and that just do it in a world of fog. But this is the part that I'm sure you've realized that men suck at, is not having community, because often you're not going to be able to take that first step, but someone's going to come into your life and hold out their hand and say, take a step with me. Like someone's going to run into Armando and say, you've got an amazing life, Armando. I'm going to take a step towards your life, even if it's on step one of just saying, I want Armando's life. That's a direction. That's a just do it with focus, intensity, and direction. But just doing it often is the idea that that it's just noble continuing the cycle of whatever it is that you're feeling. Like that's somehow how life was designed to be wired. And I think the part that the military gets right when we're there, but we suck at on the other side, is that for 100,000 years, men did life in tribes. We never had to do decisions alone. There was always someone there to just do it with, to learn from. We didn't have to learn everything on our own. And now in 2020, men have never been more isolated in the history of humanity. And now we wonder why men are killing themselves and they don't feel like they can have direction. They don't feel like they can have a voice, or why they act out in ways that cause Me Too movements. That these are all just unconstrained masculinity and without direction.
Right. And you said something that, again, I want to bring to light, because I know, I speak to these men all the time. And this idea of that, you mentioned that fight, flight, or freeze response. I call that threat. When you're under threat, you're going to go under one of those three. You're going to fight your way out, you're going to run away, or you're going to freeze there, right? What brings about threat? There are three components that bring about threat. Things are moving too fast, right? So now it becomes overwhelming. I can't keep up with this. Things are moving too slow. I want the result now. I can't wait for this client to give me money in 2 weeks because I have bills tomorrow. Things are moving too slow, or unclear intent. Maybe something is moving at you at a great speed, but you're very unclear as to whether you can even handle it. Are you going to be able to overcome whatever gets brought to you? Or if you walked into a dark room and I asked you, walk across the room confidently, how confident do you think you're going to walk if it's a pitch black room? Not very confident, because you don't know what's there. You don't want to run into a wall. You don't want to trip over furniture. You don't want to, it changes completely the second we turn on the light. So when you have hesitation, when you have procrastination, very often it's a lack of clarity. You turn the lights on the situation, all of a sudden confidence improves, path becomes more apparent, and now you're more likely to take that first step. So when you keep pulling back and people say, I just keep procrastinating this, very often there's something there that you're very unclear about. Why you're doing it, why it's important. Is this even something you should be doing? How should I do it? All these things are areas that if you don't have clarity in, you're going to hesitate to take that first step or that next step. Does that make sense?
Have you seen the Frozen 2 movie?
I haven't seen part 2. I've seen part 1.
So Frozen 2, so like in the first one, Let It Go was this famous line. For Frozen 2, there's a song that says, just take what feels the right next step is. And another piece of hidden life advice that flies over most parents probably. And the part that, like, for me, what I realize when I have that fog around me is once you know you have a direction to go, and once you take a step, it's almost instantly when you create movement, that fog starts to lift and you can create clarity. But the moment you start standing still again, you start doubting everything. You start questioning your decisions. You don't have clarity on those things what you're talking about. And that's where I think you can question a lot of your identity And if you don't have a strong identity, most military veteran dads don't, then you start just doubting every reason you even exist to be present and to breathe oxygen, because then everything seems like a crazy thought, and even the one where your family's better without you, because you just continue to retreat and retreat further from what it is that you're supposed to be taking action on.
Can I zoom out for a second?
Yep.
Okay. So you just described probably one of the most difficult times in my life right there. Imagine working for something that you felt so confident about, and at the end of that, feel like that is your prison, feeling that you've created your own prison, created the thing that's trapping you. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but it doesn't feel great. All my life, based off all the stories and all the things we've talked about, it sounds like, yeah, oh, he's on the path. Everything is easy flowing. And for most of my life, it was. I was very clear on what my next step was. There was a point 6 years ago where I fell into this, I'm going to use the word depression. Let's call it depression in quotations, not in a clinical depression, but in a less than state of what my normal being is.
A rut.
So, a rut. But to the point where I almost bankrupted our business. I was turning clients away. I was sleeping in the middle of the day, like 6 hours in a day. I would just come home. I don't want to be at work anymore. I would just come home and I would just go to sleep. I had no desire to do anything. I had no aspiration. I felt stuck. I felt like I had no purpose. There was something that happened that I felt so trapped by the life that I had created, by the business that I created. See, I set up our business to be able to serve others. And somewhere along the line there, I got unclear as to, wait, what's the bigger purpose in this? And I started looking out there. And for the first time in my life, I really started feeling like I didn't know who I was. My identity was, who am I? Who am I? And this is me with 2 kids, married, and my wife is pregnant with our 3rd child. And here I am, pretty much bankrupting the business. We're having trouble paying for our business, for our expenses. And now what do I do? At the time, I had a coach of mine that reached out, and he invited me to go to Thailand to a retreat. It sounds awesome. The problem was I can't afford it. Number 2, when the retreat in Thailand is, which is halfway across the world, it's literally a 12-hour difference.
Yep.
My wife, if the baby came early, which is possible because the other ones did come early, I would have missed the birth of my 3rd child. So what do? I talked to my wife, and I would say in a very humble, I was in a very humbled place to be able to go to my wife and say, look, I don't know what to do. This is an opportunity presented to me. I don't want to miss the birth of our child. We can't pay for this. What are your thoughts? And she asked me point blank. Now, if you've ever met a pregnant woman, there's a lot of emotional ranges that go on.
Unpredictable ones. You can walk in and it's this range, and 5 minutes later you walk back and it's like, well, you were just all nice 5 minutes ago. What happened?
Right. So my wife at this point asked me, do you think this will help you? And I said, yes, I believe this is going to help me get out of my rut, get out of this depression, this stuckness. And she looked at me and she said, to me, this is a moment in my life where I felt like I've experienced or witnessed one of the greatest acts of courage, because she is, 6 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant. And we're having trouble paying the bills. We have 2 other kids. And she looks at me and she says, do you think this is going to help? And I said, yes. She goes, then you need to go and do it. Not for you, but for us. Because we need you to be the man, the husband, and the father that I know you can be. And she goes, I would rather you miss the birth of our child. I don't want you to, but I would rather you miss that than them miss out on the father that I know you to be if you continue down this path. And I was like,
oof, yeah.
right? Fast forward, I go to Thailand. The day before I'm set to leave, which is a 24-hour endeavor.
Yeah, you're in the air
door to
for
door.
24 hours, yeah.
I talked to her. She is about to go into the hospital because she is vomiting profusely. She's alone with the kids. And as she's telling me this, and I can hear her suffering, the cab comes, which the only way I'm able to talk to her is through the Wi-Fi. I can't call her. So I have to tell her, I have to go to get on this plane. And my last words with her are her suffering. And now for the next 24 hours, I'm thinking about that flying back.
Memory, yeah.
I get back. They had to send her to the hospital to put IVs and everything like that. Baby was fine. 3 days later, the baby's born. I share that story for a few reasons. Number one, all that we've talked about leading up to this was the easy path. Everything was flowing. Everything was moving. Yeah. I don't want to give anyone the sensation that I don't have the struggles. Everyone goes through struggles. The other reason why is maybe somebody is in that moment right now where they're in the darkness. Number one, surround yourself with people that are going to support you. I was very fortunate that I have my wife right there.
So you ended up missing the birth then?
No. 3 days later, when I got back,
oh, okay,
the baby was born.
I was thinking 3 days after the hospital incident that she was born. So
no,
in the end, it all worked out.
I got back. I had a new level of clarity, right? One of the things that I think people miss out, the word retreat means to separate yourself from your day-to-day life. That's what retreat is, to retreat away from your day-to-day to gain perspective. And I mean, to say that I stepped away halfway around the world is an understatement, right?
Even if on a vacation, it's a retreat because learning how other people view the world is a gift as well.
Right. There, I was fortunate to be guided with a wonderful coach that I trust, was able to help me gain more clarity as to what really the problem was. The business wasn't the problem. I loved the business, but somehow I felt trapped. But it had nothing to do with the business. It had to do with me. I realized that the work that I was doing was helpful. The problem was there was another level that I wasn't addressing. And while I was over there, I was able to create essentially the program that I wanted as a married man, as an entrepreneur that is family focused. Like, what would I have liked knowing what I know now, that as an entrepreneur, as someone who wants to put their family first, like what's that process look like so that I can have a healthy relationship with my wife, with my kids, with my own health, and create a business that is abundant and in alignment with those values, not fighting them. Does that make sense?
100%. And the one thing, there was a podcast with Andy Frisella that I was listening to, and he described a rut perfectly. And this hit me really hard. The only difference between a rut and a grave is the depth. And if you're in a rut, continuing to be in that rut, the only difference is one's 8 feet down and one's just beginning.
Right.
And your rut would have continued had you not pivoted out of that rut and decided to chart your own life. And there was something else that I was picking up on, and we haven't even got the legacy yet, but I think the way, when you built your business, you forgot that most business, to me, a business exists to create something for my family to either carry on, or it creates a life for my family to thrive. And oftentimes the American culture is your business is your identity. And if you do that with that type of wiring, you end up having this identity at work and this identity at home. And in your case, you own that identity at work, but they weren't jiving. And that got out of balance with what the vision that your dad had. That vision wasn't always an integrated life. It wasn't about a balance between work and family. It was your dad brilliantly integrated his life to be present with you and the gift at home. And to me, that's legacy, is when you create something that's integrated that allows both to thrive. One becomes a vehicle that enables the other, and your family becomes a vehicle for you to enable your business. Then that's something that can then create something that impacts your kids. That's something that can give opportunities to your kids, because that's really where the legacy takes that next level, is when you can pass on everything that your kids got. And like one of the dreams for me, and probably sure for you as well, is to make sure that my kids get outside of their life as often as possible, because that's what gives you depth to where you fit into the world. And you can't figure out how you fit into the world by living your life. You have to see it from the outside looking in, and you can't do that from going to school for 12 years.
Right. It's I like to call it the shading, right? If you look at a piece, if you look at a sketch, what changes it from a flat sketch to one that pops out at you is shading. It's all of a sudden, it's the darkness that brings out the light.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It highlights the light. It makes it come out.
And it adds depth to the drawing.
Right. Right. So don't run away from the darkness. It's part of the whole masterpiece.
Mm-hmm. And I often, I'm sure you run into ego as something you have to coach through. Even probably yourself, when you were in that pit, there was probably an ego that was protecting the world from realizing that Armando was hurting inside. And I usually like to describe it with light and darkness, that ego is your protection mechanism to hide what you're hiding in the darkness. And bringing it into the light is the fastest way to feel like you can feel free and you're not holding all this in the shadows. Because when you're having a conversation and you have an ego, your body's rotating profusely back and forth so that no one sees what's in that shadow. So it's going to create a persona. It's going to do whatever it needs to hide whatever's there. But when you bring it out into the light, you realize that doesn't make you weak. That makes you stronger, because vulnerability is one of the most powerful tools we have to connect to human beings. And it's the one in 2020 that's usually the most dustiest that people use on a daily basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just even you sharing that story, that's a vulnerable moment that by some standards would have made you a weak man, but by the right standard, it makes you a strong man. And that is what's going to allow someone else to feel an emotion that they've been avoiding feeling for a long time, probably when they first hear that story.
Right. Right. You use the concept of darkness and light. And one of the things that I share with my clients is one of my jobs as a coach is to be your guru. And let me define why I say that. Guru comes from the Sanskrit, from two words, gu and ru. Gu meaning darkness, ru into light. So a guru is quite literally somebody who brings you out of the darkness into the light.
Well, there's a definition that needs to be repeated 1,000 times, because that's the opposite of what most people hear the word guru. Guru is almost like someone that's, I don't know, most people would say, like, I don't need another guru in my life.
Right.
But not in this. If you break it down you're like, yeah, I probably really do need a bigger freaking flashlight in my life, and a guru would be that flashlight.
Right. And by the way, it's not always to be the light, right? My job isn't always to be the light. It's to be the light when you can't find yours, but it's also to help you uncover the stuff covering your light.
You ever study Einstein?
When you say study, what do you mean? I'm not a big...
His theoretical ideas of the universe?
I can't say that I know of them, but I can't say them.
So there's one about time travel, and I've always loved it to explain coaching. So Einstein theorized that you could travel back in time if you could take a beam of light and bend it back in on itself to the same point that it was beginning at. But
circle.
You can't, a circle of light. You can't bend light in that particular way, so we can't time travel. And this is why you need a coach to be that reflection of that light back in on itself, because you can't bend your own light back in on itself to really see what you need to see. And you need a guru to help reflect that light truly back in on itself, because the mind is not capable of doing that full circle in on itself to really see all of the darkness, but then also where all the light, because a lot of times people don't give themselves enough credit for the light that they do have out. Exactly. That they discredit for who they are to the human beings around them. And that that's something that a coach can also help, because you just can't reflect that light back in on itself to really see your own potential, which I see time traveling as a little bit of seeing your own potential from a different view. And I always like that explanation. And combining it with light and darkness, it makes even more sense of a good coach is that reflection back of your internal light to understand its true power.
Right. And again, when I'm hearing you say this, and it makes me laugh because I think one of the big misconceptions, though, about coaching, now that you bring that up, is that coaching is necessary. You could argue that yes, but I would argue that it's more of a luxury. Coaching is not for surviving. We've survived thousands, millions, whatever you want to believe, years.
You can survive years just watching Netflix every day and still have.
So you don't need coaching to survive. Coaching is for those who want to thrive. And that distinction makes it completely different. Because if you have no desire to thrive, if you have just remain in stasis, then coaching is not going to help you, because part of coaching is to help you thrive. There's a growth component to that. If you have no desire to grow, there's no point in you hiring a coach. There's no point in you seeking that out, because you're not going to be moving in that direction. You have no desire. But if your desire is to grow, is to thrive, coaching is a vehicle to speed that up. Coaching is a vehicle to gain more clarity quicker, because now, guess what? You get to borrow somebody else's prefrontal cortex when you're in the darkness, right? Because this is some neuroscience. You mind if I jump into some of the neuroscience?
Sure.
So when we are in threat, we downgrade to the level of our different brains. We have 3 brains. We have a reptilian brain, which is responsible for keeping us alive, for food, for shelter, for reproducing, for keeping us safe. Is this going to kill me? Yes or no? Like, it's primary needs. Then it upgrades to the mammalian brain, which is responsible for tribal unity, interaction with people. It's like if you're in a group of people and somebody looks at you weird, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, does that guy hate me? Does that person, like, did I do something wrong? Like, you start having this. That's happening in the mammalian brain. But when you're in either one of those, you can't access your human brain, which is responsible for self-actualization, thinking ahead. If you ever talk to somebody that's really in the darkness and you say, what's your big goal? What's your big vision? Sometimes it's very difficult for them to articulate it, because they don't have access to that part of their brain right now. It's not that they don't have that answer, is that they don't have access to it right now because they're down in these animal brains. And part of the job of a coach is to provide the support, the safety, the clarity, and the direction to help move them from the animals to the human, to then be able to create the thriving future that they want.
I like that. And I can see that in so many different ways of, we recently, before losing my job, we had a housekeeper, and I was at work telling them, we have a housekeeper come twice a month. And one coworker was like, it must be nice. And I was like, well, it is nice, but you choose to spend it on shoes. I choose to spend it on a housekeeper because that gives me more time with my family. And those are just different 2 levels of consciousness. I dream a little bit bigger, and how can I free up my more time? And I realize that if I don't have a big stack of shoes, then I can have a housekeeper that takes away some of the things that I don't want doing, like mowing the yard, and which is something also I had a little while back. And then there's other people that just view it as that this is the only path for them, and they never actually see a different path to start taking.
Right.
Which is, I think, so important, why when you raise your kids, to raise them in a way that they have the widest view of whatever they want to do with their life, because there is so much more life that we as Americans suck at living. And you have it because you're at your heritage, but I mean, 20% of Americans have a passport and only 10% use them. And somehow Americans have a worldview, which is an oxymoron in itself. And kids need to have depth to their world. And that is so critical. They need to have that complex shadow arrangement of a building to be able to understand how they fit into it. And ultimately where their light best fits into it as well. Like when you understand depth, then you can figure out where your natural gifts for the world fit in versus running through a course that college and doing a job and getting debt and all the other things and realizing, man, I missed a left turn back there when I was 21.
Right.
And now you're 35 and you're stuck.
You perceive you're stuck.
Perceived you're stuck. That's the perception that your brain says that there's no other way through it. And debt can be that because you feel like you don't have any choices when you have debt.
Correct. Agreed.
You outsource that power to the banks.
Right.
You don't realize it until you want to make that choice and you're like, oh, I can't because I have a $500 car payment.
Right. Right. Exactly. You've already made the choice ahead. You've borrowed against your future. So now you're still paying it back.
The American way.
Indeed.
So Armando, as we wrap up this interview, because I love this interview because we talked in a lot of different things that we've never talked about on the podcast. And what's one piece of advice that you want to leave for dads out there that are often don't process their emotions, that we aren't recognizing our power as a father in shaping our kids' future, and then also understanding how your commitment to your wife is the one commitment that goes past every other commitment in your life? What advice would you give out there to that kind of dad to help them come home?
That's a big one. I would say, well, I mean, you said it, the fact that if you can honor your wife, and remember, you chose your wife. You didn't choose your kids.
Mm-hmm.
You helped make your kids, but you didn't choose them. You chose your wife. That means you got to work on that. Like, if that doesn't work, then the family unit doesn't work, which is going to affect the kids. Mm-hmm. And so because you made the choice for your wife, you had to choose her, or she chose you, or maybe a combination. Work at it each and every day. This isn't a competition. This is an opportunity for you guys to grow and build each other up.
Just like your wife gave you that gift, allowing yourself to be built up.
Right. If you're separated, right? Let's say you're deployed. If you're in the military, are you going to be there in the day-to-day? No. But when you talk to her, are you distracted? Are you asking to really find out what it is that she needs? What does she need to fill her cup? There's some people that need gifts. There's some people that need words of affirmation. I'm sure you've heard of the 5 love languages, right? So what is her love language? Are you actually speaking in her love language? I really love that book because it simplifies it. And if you know nothing else, you're like, okay, wait, if this is where she experiences love the most and I'm away, I don't have that much time to make an impact until I get back. So what can I do that really aligns with that can really impact her until the next time we speak or till the next time we see each other? Because that's hard. There's no two ways about it. It's hard. Relationships are hard. If you don't work on them on a day-to-day basis, the same way that if you don't work on your health, if you don't work on your fitness on a day-to-day basis, it atrophies.
Mm-hmm.
It gets worse. So either you have a thriving and vibrant health or marriage, or they're all relationships with your body, relationships with your God. If you're a person of faith, if you don't work on them, you don't nurture them like you would a plant, give it the sun, give it the water, give it the nutrition, it's none of it's going to get, it's not going to grow. It's not going to happen by mistake. It's not supposed to be easy.
Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of Americans think that we try to engineer out the struggle, but the struggle is actually the process of living and the process of growing. And without those two things, you're really dying.
Exactly. I agree 100%.
Well, Armando, I'm really glad you came into my life, and I am positive that this is going to be not our only time that we've ever talked. And I look forward to many more conversations that we've had, and I'm sure the dads listening to this have enjoyed it as well. And I just really want to appreciate you for giving us your time today. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And where is the good website if people want to follow up and more? I'm sure the Legacy Code is on pretty much anywhere where books are sold. Where's a good website to follow you if they want?
I would say if you want to take a look at the actual, it has enough information there, and it has different interviews and so forth. Is the legacycodebook.com it's a
Okay.
great one to look at. Or you can just go on my name, ArmandoCruz.com, and that's another one that you can find both.
All right. I'll include links for those in the show notes for anybody that wants to hop over there quickly so they don't have to remember the URLs. And like I said, Armando, I'm really appreciative of you coming into my life, and I'm looking forward to growing this friendship in the future.
Likewise. Take care.
That's a wrap. And thank you for listening to today's show, and I really hope you enjoyed it. The lifeblood of any new podcast are the reviews. If you haven't reviewed the podcast yet on iTunes, I would really appreciate it, and you will help us get the message out to even more military veteran dads. As John Maxwell says, if there is hope in the future, there is power in the present. Dads, it's time to come home.